The Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall is a vast and enigmatic world. Thanks to projects like Daggerfall Unity, it is still highly regarded, though largely misunderstood by modern gamers. I will be the first to admit that diving into Daggerfall head-on today is quite the challenge.
What am I doing? Oh my god, a woman! Jesus! What the hell do you want, Dorito? Wow. Wow.
But for all of its downfalls and issues related to its antiquity, you will find that beneath its pixelated surface is an enchanting world waiting to be explored and conquered. One of my favorite elements in any RPG is, you guessed it, the clothing. And I was absolutely amazed by what Daggerfall had to offer in that department. Today we're going to be diving into the wonderful and weirdly varied world of Daggerfall clothing. Before we get started, hi, my name is Angelika, and I know exactly what you're going to say. Reading all of those Elder Scrolls has hindered my vision to the point where even Daggerfall graphics amaze me, but I assure you my vision is perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Now before we begin with any sort of breakdowns of the clothing items, we must first understand how clothing works in Daggerfall, and to understand how the clothing works, we need to look at how the character models work. Just a quick editor's note, I refer to them as character models several times in this video as a force of habit. I do not talk about 2D sprites often, but yeah, the correct term here is 2D sprites, and I've called them models for I think the entire video, so I'm sorry about that. Please don't come for me, Reddit. It's been a long day. In Daggerfall, you're actually working with the paper doll system, which is the only form in which you can see your character in the game through the character inventory menu. So when doing research for this video, I came across dfworkshop.net, and they've got category archives on technical content, which best helps you to understand how clothing works on these paper dolls. Body morphology is a key part of understanding the scope of these clothing items in the game, so essentially for each item of clothing, there are 8 variations to suit both male and female body types of Khajiit, elves, Argonians, and human races. This becomes even more clear when you try to equip an item such as the Khajiit bodysuit, which is available for all race types, on a race or even gender to which that particular model that you have in your inventory does not correspond. A case in which you would actually have a non-corresponding version of a clothing item is if you added it via console commands, otherwise the game will offer you clothing that already fits your character's race and gender. To show you the example, here is the suit as meant for Argonian male models on a Nord female model. As you can see, it has a bulky body type, clearly male, and you can see that the skin of the character around the edges kind of pokes out because again it wasn't meant to fit this particular paper doll. It doesn't necessarily have to be male, like you can try this with the Khajiit female suit that was intended for the Khajiit model, and again we have those edges, so then we will try the Nord Khajiit suit, and here you can see it actually fits perfectly. Now the reason I choose this suit as an example is because it is a bodycon piece of clothing meant to very tightly suit the specific body type that it is intended for, and so it helps us to have a better understanding of the different paper dolls of each race. This is different to what we're used to, for example, with Skyrim, where essentially you have like the one body for all races, just different when it comes to the 2 genders. Another thing to note is that Daggerfall actually takes the immersive fashion experience a step further than most modern RPGs do by allowing you to change the look of particular clothing items on your characters by just clicking on them without, having to use like a merchant to help you change the look and pay gold for it. I'm talking about tucking in your shirt, tucking it out, buttoning, unbuttoning, hood up, hood down, without again having to pay any merchant for this. All you gotta do is click the use option in your inventory and then click on the clothing item on your paper doll. This will then present you with the variations of that particular piece of clothing. To me, that is absolutely unbeatable. It doesn't have like 100 options and not every item can be changed, but the fact that I can cycle through 3 or 4 just makes me feel so much more in control of the character's look. And when I did my research for this, I found that many players actually appreciate this for the role-playing capabilities. So, the buttoned up shirt could be for colder places, or you could have the hood up when it's raining. It just shows that the community really does appreciate small things like that in reality don't actually affect the gameplay in any way. Like Morrowind, Daggerfall clothing can be layered with armor, which makes for some very unique and versatile combinations. Now, I think we're finally ready to dive into the specific clothing items themselves, and while categorizing this is sort of tricky just because of the variety of stuff that's actually available, I have come up with the following. Full body outfits, shirts, pants/skirts, undergarments, shoes and footwear, Cloaks, and Miscellaneous. So when going through the categories, I will go through the female options first and then the male options. Now, just a little side note that I found personally, I mentioned before that the game will only offer you the clothing that's for your specific race and gender. However, if you were to add via console commands clothing that wasn't for your gender, you can still equip it, but again, it will look wrong on your paper doll. Another quick note before we really dive in, Daggerfall has nudity, which does mean that there are some NSFW options out there, particularly for the female characters. It is what it is, but admittedly, it does allow for even more customization and versatility. If we go there. Let's begin with the full outfits. Starting with the women's clothes, this is where I really got inspired to actually make this video and do this deep dive in the first place. For full outfits, you have different types of gowns. So the evening gown comes in two separate variations, one with long balloon sleeves and the other with no sleeves, and it just appears to be in two pieces. I'm just gonna say it right here. This is exactly what the girls want. Not gonna speak for the guys, maybe they like it too, but just from a girl's perspective, I am in awe. This is what's missing for me in a lot of modern RPGs. Big, flowy, high fantasy dresses, there's volume, there is a ton of color options, and all we get nowadays are just like these really flat selections of outfits, and a lot of them have pretty dull colors. This is what really appeals to me, and I know I'm not alone with that. Now, I think Oblivion actually did a pretty good job with this, particularly in the Shivering Isles, but it was very limited. And I understand there can be challenges with making more voluminous clothing, but I would so love to see them just try it. The next one is the day gown. Again, stunning. It has that off-the-shoulder look, just beautiful. You have more simple options as well, but I feel like even they surpass in concept a lot of what is actually available in later Elder Scrolls games. The strapless dress can be varied to have slits or to be a full skirt. Note that all of this, by the way, can be layered with armor. This also allows for layering with other clothing items underneath with different colors, again, just to really make it your own, really make it unique. There are more simple dress options also if that's what you're kind of looking for, more robe type options, which is more of what we're used to with the clothing in later games. There's then the formal Eodoric. Now, I am not exactly sure how to pronounce this. I tried looking up exactly what this would be in the real world, but I actually really struggled finding anything. All the information that there is relating to Daggerfall, so if anybody has any other ideas on what that is, yeah, let me know. Also, if I'm pronouncing it wrong, let me know. Now, this has several styles, including an NSFW one, giving some real ancient Egypt vibes. For males, we have less full outfit options, but the ones that are available are some priest and plain robes. Moving on, we have shirts. With women's shirts, we have several options, including the short shirt, which has several variations to cycle through. So you can have it tucked in, tucked out, with a vest, or without. There is another short shirt, which is unchangeable. Same goes for the long shirt, which can be tucked in or out, even buttoned up, and with an added vest. They seem to really like adding that green vest to everything. There is also a different type of long shirt, which is also unchangeable. For the men, we have a lot of options here. So first is the kimono. There are also long and shirt options, which have similar changing capabilities to the female variants of the same. An interesting one I thought was the vest. Really unique design and probably one of my personal favorites. For some fancier options, there is the Dwynnin surcoat, but my overall favorite chest or shirt slot clothing item for the men is the formal tunic, which kind of looks like a cozy sweater. Same goes for the reversible tunic. I mean, this is really like a big Christmas sweater. It feels like it's kind of out of place, but also it isn't, if that makes sense. You then have some options like the sash, which I think is pretty cool. Definitely feels like a more alternative route to take with clothing than RPGs would typically offer. Let's discuss pants and skirts next. Now, for both men and women, it's very interesting for me how there are actually very limited options when it comes to pants. The casual pants is the option that you're starting out with regardless of gender, and they're pretty much like the ragged prisoner trousers. That's kind of the vibe they're giving me, and what you would recognize from the other games when you're starting out. Nothing too out there. You then have the tights, and though it seems like it's just one item, it actually has several different styles, so yeah, not really a huge selection. The men also have a breeches option. The skirts then are more interesting, so you can have the wrap and the long skirt, and the long skirt has a variation with slits. For the men, you have a short skirt, which I thought was funny, a long skirt, and a wrap. Now moving on to a section which I really didn't expect, but I also kind of see it, like it makes sense with just everything in Daggerfall. That's the undergarments section. So the thing that kind of separates Daggerfall from the other Elder Scrolls games for me in terms of clothing is the fact that they were quite bold when it came to like very revealing outfits. Clothing that actually leaves you pretty exposed. So to start, the women literally have a brassiere option, which is the same as the base underwear. Variety, I guess. And then you have the formal brassieres, which have a few variations, but they're rather creative. I can't say that I hate them. Maybe I don't understand all of them, but they're pretty well done, and I thought it was a rather unique thing to include. The loincloth then would be the bottom half, and that too has several variations, including what you would recognize as the base undergarment. For the men, you also have several loincloth options to really channel your inner Tarzan. Now for shoes and footwear, there isn't really that wide a selection. You mostly have sandals for both genders, and then you have like shoes, boots, and tall boots also available for both genders. Not a whole lot, but it looks like shoes really weren't the highlight of clothing in Daggerfall. Now for cloaks. Both genders have a casual and a formal cloak option, and the reason that I'm highlighting this one is because you can actually equip up to 2 cloaks, which do come in several different variations, and I mean, this can either give you an interesting looking combo, or it will look a little odd as it does kind of conflict with each other. You don't really have head clothing items in Daggerfall, so the cloaks is really as close as it comes to that, and I like that you have the option to have your hood up or down. Again, for immersion, for role-playing, it's there. Finally, some stuff that I didn't really know how to categorize, so I put it into the miscellaneous pieces. For women, the only option I can mention is the Khajiit suit. Kind of reminds me of Catwoman, I guess, and this can actually be worn under every piece of clothing other than what would go down as bottoms, so no skirts, pants, or even loincloths can be worn over it. Men also have the Khajiit suit, which similarly can be worn under most pieces besides pants, but men also have several interesting options, such as different types of straps that go on their bare chest, sort of a barbarian look, and then you also have the toga, and my personal favorites, the armbands and the fancy armbands. I really like them because it's just not like the typical options that you would expect would be available, and yet they're there. And that pretty much covers everything that is available. Now, when I dove into this and I discovered all of these pieces, I was pretty surprised at the variety. Like, I will admit, I wanted to know more about this. One thing that kind of disappoints me about clothing in Daggerfall is the fact that NPCs and the clothing that you wear have like nothing to do with each other. So NPCs are also dressed in clothing, but they're kind of the way that they are by design. It's not something that can be obtained. It won't be the same, even with like the more important NPCs that are like unique NPCs with their unique pieces of clothing. It's not something that you as the player can obtain. Those particular sprites were just designed that way, and that's all that there is to it. Now, going back to the stuff that pleasantly surprised me, you can actually find many clothing stores all over the world that have all of these items up for sale, which is actually the easiest way to obtain the items without using console commands. In future games in the franchise, we really didn't see that many clothing stores. In some, literally, it is just the one store, but Daggerfall had a pretty big accent on this. Clothing could also, of course, be enchanted, so it was great to have those additional slots, but as I mentioned earlier, it was also cool because you could layer it with armor like you can in Morrowind. This is my 4th Elder Scrolls video about the clothing from the games in that universe, and by now it is apparent that this was always a big and important aspect of those games, even if we didn't pay that much attention to it. I always did. I want to add a personal note here on what I would like to see in the Elder Scrolls 6. So I know that there's a lot of videos out there kind of speculating or asking for specific things to be in those games, so here's my 2 cents. I would really love for them to work on the clothing, learn from their mistakes, take from the best of the stuff that really worked, and do their best with creating and implementing it into the new game. I want them to go all out. Bold, deep colors, lots of variation, little details, different clothing for men and women, cultural clothing, some overlap for men and women, velvet, cotton, silk, wool, everything. What I don't want is for it to have like a Fortnite skin feel, and what I mean by that is Fortnite actually did have its like specific look when it first came out, but then they just started adding anything and everything to it, which made it lose a part of its charm. Whatever they end up doing with it, I would love for it to be sensible and to fit into the world, but it would also be nice to see some callbacks from our beloved pieces from the previous games. Daggerfall is almost 30 years old, and it managed to blow me away with its creative and unique approach to the clothing. Could you imagine, with our technological capabilities now, what they could do. But that about covers it for our Daggerfall clothing video, which was requested by a couple of people in the comments. I didn't know if I was going to do this or not because I just wasn't sure what's in Daggerfall to cover, but I'm so glad that I dove deeper because honestly, I didn't expect it, but I like having all of this knowledge. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. As always, thank you for all your support, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Be seeing you. Bye!